This is TWiT.
And I am very excited for the next conversation we're about to have. I do have a little disclosure. 1Password is a sponsor of the network. However, our sales team and our editorial team are two separate instances of the company, and my decision to have someone from 1Password on the show today was not influenced by the fact that 1Password is a sponsor on the network. Joining us today to talk about Passkeys Portability, well, credential portability, two individuals involved with the FIDO Alliance. We have Nick Steele, staff product manager of 1Password, as well as FIDO Alliance co-chair, and David Turner, senior technical director of standards development at the FIDO Alliance. Welcome, both of you, to the show.
Thanks, Mikah.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, great to have you here. So I'm going to kind of ask a question, and I'll let you both answer it as you see fit, and we'll just keep doing that so that way we avoid kind of crosstalk. So we'll kick it off. I was hoping that in talking about this credential portability, we can talk about breaking down the kind of key problem that these new specifications are trying to solve. Why has credential migration between providers historically been such a challenge?
Yeah. No, David, take it away.
Oh, well, the problem is that everybody keeps it in their own ecosystem, and while that works really great within the ecosystem, there are a lot of challenges when you try to shift ecosystems. If you want to go, say, between Apple and Android, or even if you have reason to move between different passkey providers, there are barriers to doing that. And the solutions that are out there tended to be very insecure. You basically save things to text files to your local machine, and that's a really bad thing to do with important credentials. And on the mobile devices, there's largely no way to do that at all. So it's kind of solving two parts of the problem, making it the capabilities more broadly available to the industry, and at the same time making it a very secure way to exchange the data.
Yeah, right now the kind of default across the industry is to export a CSV. It's unencrypted, unformatted. It's generally a pain in the butt, not just for users, but for companies in the credential management space to marshal and format these files. And sometimes that data gets lost. So there's no guarantees right now that your credentials, when they move from A to B, when you get a new phone and potentially a new credential manager, say you're moving, from an iPhone to an Android device, that those credentials are going to all be able to be imported or exported properly. Additionally, it's credential exchange is not just about import, export, migration. It's about shareability, right? If you have 1Password today and someone else has Dashlane and you want to share a credential, well, there's no great way of doing that. So if I want to share something with, my mom, who's actually a Dashlane user, I use a few, so I'm not picking favorites. But the process is, she has to go either download 1Password or the credential manager that I'm trying to share with, or she needs to copy paste the credential, or I need to copy it to her, in a separate chat, which undermines the whole reason for having a manager in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Now, something that stood out to me, the specifications mentioned 12 billion, with a B, online accounts that can now be accessed with passkeys. The narrative seems to be that there are still very few accounts out there that support passkeys, but that's quite a few. So how significant is this standardization effort for accelerating actual passkey adoption across the industry?
It's critical. I mean, when you look at, Google's already announced 800 million users have access to passkeys, and Microsoft's rolled it out to all of their MSN users, and Amazon's announced like 175 million people. When you start adding up, that's three, and then Apple in their ecosystem is about 1.5 billion users. That's already you're at 2.5, 3 billion, and that's just 3 accounts. Everyone always talks about the number of accounts they've got there. And an effort like this requires standardization, because if you only have one, of course, it's useless. But even if you just have 2 vendors involved, it still has little value. What you really need is it to be as available and as well integrated as the rest of the ecosystem, because that then removes the barriers to adoption. Anytime you're trying to use a new technology, there's the technology itself, and then there's how do you use the technology, and the ability to move the passwords around is an important part of this whole ecosystem. And so having a secure way to do that is a really, really important key to getting this more broadly deployed.
Something a little nerdy. The specifications address both secure protocol, CXP, and standardized format, CXF. I was hoping you could explain why both components are necessary for this credential exchange to work as it needs to.
Yeah, absolutely. So the credential exchange protocol just defines how we can securely and privately move credentials from A to B. But what's really critical, right, is that same thing I was talking about earlier on, right, is we all need to be able to speak the same language once the credentials move, because we may get dropped data. This is really critical and kind of new to the space of being able to move credentials, right, is that we're going to start defining formats for how credentials should look in code, or really just in JSON, for how they should be moved, stored, and securely backed up. This doesn't just help with exchange itself and sharing, but for the long-term format and storage of credentials and data related to identity, this is necessary. There's other standards like SCIM2 that exist for managing and formatting identity information about users. The same needs to exist for credentials.
Now, you look at the list of participating companies, and it's, Apple, Google, password managers like 1Password, which is the password manager I use, Bitwarden. How difficult was it to get these companies on board? I guess more what I'm asking is, did everybody kind of go, this is something that we really just need to make happen, and so it was just easy to kind of get everybody on board? Or was it a little bit like pulling teeth, if you can answer that?
Yeah, I can tackle that one. So pretty much everyone in the press release is already a member of the FIDO Alliance, where we define, the infrastructure and such for passkeys. And so we already have all of those people having conversations about making passkeys work. They're already invested in the ecosystem. And so it wasn't a big leap, and it was a pretty clear step to say, yeah, we need to be able to move this stuff around. So for the people that we were already engaged with, who were already members, it actually wasn't a big step. Because, as I said, they're already doing this work. They already know what their customers need, and quite frankly are asking for. And so, there's always battles about what's in the spec and, how does that fit within an ecosystem and so on. But at the conceptual level, we had pretty much everyone on board pretty quickly, and it's been a very positive collaboration, which is always great to see.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I love about working in the FIDO Alliance the most is I've been involved in FIDO for 8 years, and I've been in standards for 10 as a whole across a lot of different bodies. But it's a really collaborative nature. We don't come at it from a competitive angle, and we're there to make credentials and passkeys, specifically in the FIDO Alliance, work for users. One of the things that I feel like we managed to, really get ahead of is, I think early on this year, you saw a lot of press come out saying that, passkeys are going to be a walled garden. They're a way to lock people into platforms and keep people from, moving off of where they keep their credentials. And that's really not the case. We just really wanted there to be a secure way for credentials to be moved, because, unlike passkeys, if you lose the private key to these credentials, then that's a higher security concern, because we're putting a lot more trust in these types of credentials than we are passwords in the past.
Definitely. Now, the protocol does emphasize secure credential exchange in both online and offline scenarios. I think the question is a little obvious, but at the same time, I'd love to hear these nerdy details of why it was important to support different network conditions, because you've got some services that use the cloud for a lot of things, but then there may be times when you don't. So what led to the choice there?
I'm really glad you called this out. I was saying to Dave right before the call, I was like, this is a really nerdy question. I'm really glad to get
yay,
the good ones. So we really wanted to make credential exchange work in a variety of scenarios. Right now, as we said, right, the default is a CSV that you have to kind of hope that users delete. And if you want to make sure that users are going to do this securely, well, not only do you need to support these like consumer cases where I'm just trying to move to a new provider, but you need to support these business cases, these more high assurance cases where being online may not be available. You may be in a secure environment, or you may be trying to move credentials from your laptop in your office to a rack in your data center, and there may be a firewall in between or some air gap where you need to be able to move those credentials with different network conditions, or in cases where they can't reach out to the same services and backend. One of the things that we really explored in credential exchange and are going to continue to develop is these enterprise specific flows, these high assurance, high security flows, where the business actually has a lot more authority around the movement of credentials and could potentially apply things like policy or authorization certificates and signing that could say that this user is allowed to move these credentials and only these types of credentials from this provider to this provider, and then in the case of these certificates being there, being online or offline may be an optional thing, but the business still has the ability to authorize this movement. And that's something that's, brand new and I think pretty innovative in the space that we worked on a lot in FIDO.
One of the key features, of course, is the ability to securely move passkeys between providers. And I think from the outside looking in, you hear one company supports passkeys, another company supports passkeys, a password management platform supports passkeys. It seems like if we all have the same little key, then moving my key from this place to this place and that place to that place should be easy. But there were clearly and are clearly challenges. What were the specific challenges, or maybe the biggest one or the biggest few that needed to be addressed for this credential exchange to be as simple as I imagine you all intend to make it?
Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry, David, go for it. Yeah.
Oh no, I was just going to say that it, in my mind, and it's not. This is not a geeky answer, but it boils down to being able to do it securely, right? That right off the top. If we're going to move stuff between 2 points, important stuff, it's got to be done in a very secure, trusted way. The second is the data formats vary wildly. You try and move stuff between password managers today, and you get nominal levels of success because the way they define, all the elements of a password versus, say, credit card information, it's not the same. You get some of the data coming over, you miss pieces. And so the value of having agreed upon data structures is actually a huge value as well, so that we get a much better quality of information exchange. And it's easier to say at a whole level, I recognize this credential type or I don't. In which case you can be really clear that, all right, the ones I recognized, I brought them in, but here are the ones that I didn't. And so you can give the end user a clear indication of what worked and what didn't work. Whereas today, some of the stuff might roll in and you really don't know what did and what didn't.
Yeah, behind the scenes on a lot of these credential managers, the plumbing is very different. So being able to, have this protocol in place that is going to standardize how we communicate these credentials was the biggest first step. I think there's still a lot of work being done on, behind the scenes and at 1Password, Dashlane, Bitwarden, and a lot of these orgs that we're working directly with. And we'll have a beta rollout of CXP with shortly of just like making sure that we're able to behind the scenes get these credentials in the format they need to be exchanged and work like we say they're going to work.
Understood. Now, let's talk about the future. These specifications, at least when I heard that this was coming through the pipeline, I thought, okay, this is it. Now I can get excited about passkeys without seeming like I am, thinking the earth is flat, in the sense that people will actually believe me and be excited that this is the future. But I wanted to ask you both, do you think this is the last big hurdle for making passkeys a more common form of login or other type of authentication, excuse me, or do you still have some boxes that you're looking to check in terms of getting, my cousins and my uncles and everybody else who's not super steeped in technology on board with wanting to use them?
From a technology standpoint, it's a big one. Because that lock-in notion or fear of lock-in was, as Nick said earlier in the year, being discussed quite a bit out in the wild. And but it's what's interesting is awareness is a big part of it too. It's not just a technology. There aren't just technology gaps. There's just awareness gaps. People see passkey. They don't know what that is. They don't know if they should trust it. The notion of doing things without a password on the surface sounds scary to people, even though it's more secure. So the deployment is dependent on a variety of factors, not just the technical ones, but absolutely this is a big step forward on the technical side.
Yeah, I think with regards to CXP, right? The first step is allowing for passkey portability, and we're actually going to come out. I mentioned that a few of us in the credential manager space, including Bitwarden, Dashlane, Google, 1Password, are going to work on supporting passkeys, passwords, and some other information. Usually, I think addresses, credit cards, pretty soon. Like, we want to be able to support a broader range of credentials, and we see credential exchange protocol really being the first step in a broader conversation about where credentials are headed, especially as we start seeing more digital credentials and MDLs, mobile driver's licenses, become more widely available. We want to be able to support the movement and management of these credentials and allow for that user to have sovereignty over their credentials and making them more portable. So I think this is a huge leap for passkeys, especially as David said. We're kind of moving away from that fear of lock-in. We're moving away from users feeling like they're going to, if they're moving from new devices or moving to new apps, that passkeys are going to be a risk to accessing things that they need. We're just going to make them more available. They're going to be available across more credential managers. And I think that's sort of a future that we're also planning for. I think especially as we start talking about mobile driver's licenses and having digital wallets become more widely used, we're going to be entering sort of a future where you're not just going to have 1Password or Dashlane or one credential manager. You're going to have multiple sources of credentials, and we're all going to need to talk to each other. And we see CXP as a way to enable that. Which is, like the FIDO Alliance, we're starting with passkeys, but we're building for the future.
Yeah, so I'll add two things to that. At the consumer level, this notion of, well, they tell you you're not supposed to do it, but everyone does, sharing your streaming service account password with a family member. At this point, it's like copy it down or send in a text message, and you still got to, enter it in. This way, if you can give someone, and I won't name a particular service because they'll get mad, if you share the account information with them, it's in their password manager and it will simply work. So the usability of that scenario is actually much simpler. It's the same with, shared bank accounts. Some of my bank account, or some accounts with my wife, we can only have one. Mm-hmm. Right. Well, so we have to share. So again, this makes it simpler. And some of the passkey password manager tools actually give you some control over that as well, so that can be managed. In addition, you actually have regulatory requirements. In the European Union, the EU, they're developing digital wallet infrastructure, if you will. And one of the key requirements is portability of data. That's a really big requirement in a lot of the EU cybersecurity and data areas, is to make sure that end users aren't locked in to any one platform or any one product. And so this is the kind of tool that enables that capability, again, in a way that regulators will like it, as opposed to, again, doing it in an insecure and unreliable way.
Yeah, I don't think this is like the end of the line too for what needs to be done on passkeys by any means. And a lot of that work it's not just being done in FIDO, it's being done in the W3C and the WebAuthn working group, which, I'm also a part of and David's involved with. We've been working on this for 7 or 8 years, and the work continues. We're due to publish the next version of WebAuthn and the WebAuthn API in the next month or so. And that's going to include a lot of improvements around usability of passkeys and the underlying APIs, which is defined by WebAuthn in there. So we're really interested in handling scenarios for I'd say the more high security holdouts in the space, being able to make these more usable. While usability for people is great, usability for your bank is also important. Banks and other high assurance payment service providers that experience a lot of fraud really want to make these credentials a stronger replacement for passwords, not just for them, but for their regulatory needs, as David mentioned. So we're adding a lot of things to support better, I'd say, usability, better signaling between applications and your credential managers, being able to handle things like passive enrollment and registration of passkeys is something that's coming down the line. So being able to go to a site, log in with your password, and then having one password pop up and say, hey, we saw you just logged in. Do you want to enroll a passkey? And we can just seamlessly make a passkey right after login with this site. So we think that's going to be a huge step forward in terms of usability and adoption. If we just make that process easier and easier to just roll over to something more secure, because right now a couple sites have a pretty great flow, but if you want to enroll a passkey today, okay, well, you log in, you go to your security settings, you go to add a passkey. You add you name the passkey, and it just becomes this certain amount of friction. And we really want to bring that friction down and make it just as seamless as registering an account with a password.
Absolutely. Well, David Turner, Nick Steele, I want to thank you both so much for taking the time to join me today to talk through this update. I'm very much looking forward to seeing how this progresses. Is there a place where folks should go to kind of stay up to date with what's making its way down the FIDO pipeline, as it were? FIDOalliance.org is our website, and that's probably the best starting point. There's from the top level, there'll be links down to both the passkey related documents themselves, but also credential exchange information too.
Yeah, and you can follow me at Kaiju on Blue Sky. I post there and have a couple lists of other folks like Matthew Miller and Tim Capali who post a lot in the space, and we'll keep you updated on where the spec's at.
Actually, one other quick thing to add is that there are a lot of open source initiatives in the same space trying to do this kind of transfer, and so we've taken a unique step with FIDO and set up a repo in GitHub specifically to get feedback on these specifications. So there is a direct place to provide comments. It's a publicly available repo. And again, it's on our Credential Exchange download page. I don't remember off the top of my head the name of the repo, but if anyone has been looking at the specs and they have comments or feedback, we do have a GitHub repo for that.